Hello, BSNS271 students, and Jake, if you're watching. I'd like to give you some assistance on Case 1 since I will not be there on Monday due to my jury duty service. We've already started the case, so I'm not going to go all the way back to the beginning, but I will give you just a short introduction in case you missed that class for any reason. And then this case will be due this Friday, the 30th. Here we go. Case 1 is the case that we're working on that has to deal with the outdoor club for a college. And we've already created the tables. Hopefully you've been able to import that data. We have a student members table, which lists 20 different students, gives their demographic kind of information, contact information, and then whether they've signed a release form or not. Basically, here's the layout for that. And after you import that data, then you can do a little work on cleaning up the field sizes. The student ID only needs to be 5 characters, for example, instead of 255. After you make your changes and save those, you're ready to kind of move on. We also have 2 other tables. I'll just briefly introduce those as well. We keep track of different trips that the club will have. The club actually has 10 different trips that are scheduled. And here are those different costs, start dates, end dates, that type of information. We also have a sign-ups table which lists the trip number and then which students are going on that particular trip. This one was a little bit tricky because we had to create a different kind of key. I think I told you in class that every table should have a key. Some tables have combination keys, and believe it or not, some tables don't have any key at all. But if you're looking to create a combined or a compound key, you can highlight the fields that you would like to make a key out of, because both of these have duplicates and that wouldn't be good, and we can make a combined key like I just did. Again, we did this in class on Friday, so I don't want to go too deep into it. I want to kind of push forward to show you the form and at least the first 1 or 2 queries to give you a jump start on that. So I'm going to close out our different tables, saving the changes. And on page 53, you're asked to create a form with a subform. And I'm going to kind of walk you through what that looks like and to kind of take you step by step. So if you have your books, actually page 53 and then spills on to page 54, it'll show you exactly what it should look like. I'm going to show you what it looks like. I've already built it, but I'm going to do it again. We're going to look at a form that has the students from that student members table, and then it's also going to connect that to the different trips that each one of these students is planning on going on or is reserved for that. You'll notice that as we go through, there are 20 records, 20 student members, and their trips will be listed down below in what's called a subform. So I'm scrolling through the records now, and you'll see that the screen is changing not only from the data above, but for the subform information about which trips those students are associated with. So that's what the end result should look like. Now I'm going to back up and show you how to actually make this happen. You can select the table that you want to work with. In this case, student members is our main form. Our subform will be below that on the signups. So we're going to create a form, and I can do this a couple of different ways. I could use the wizard if I wanted to. Really the easiest way, if I'm going to use all the fields, is just highlight the table I want, come up and click form, and like magic it creates that form for me with all of those fields. That's step 1. That's the form. That's the easy part. The subform is a little more difficult. If we had created a relationship between this table and the signups table, this would be a snap because that relationship would already be made and would work fine. Since we haven't created that relationship, and I recommend that you don't because of what we're going to be doing later in this case, we need to take the signups table, which is up here, and I'm going to create a subform with it, and there's a couple different ways to do this. Let's look in the design view. This is the design view. And if I take the signups table and basically attempt to drop it on top of the table that I've already created, Access is smart enough to know that I'm kind of going to create a subform, and it brings up the subform wizard for me just automatically. And it says, hey, do you want to define some kind of link, because it doesn't see a link. Logically, we know that there are students in the student member tables and there are students in the sign up tables, but we haven't created that direct relationship. So Access does a nice job. He goes out there and sees that, hey, I know what you're trying to do. You're going to create a subform. How do you want me to define this? Do you want me to show all the different signups for each record in the student members using that student ID field, because that's a common field between the two tables? It's a key field in student members. It's a primary key. It's a foreign key as part of that signups table. So Access does a great job. He actually guesses what I want to do here. It gives me the option to choose one or the other, but this looks good. I'm going to say yes, I'm going to do it. In the book, it tells you what it wants you to name it. Please follow those instructions as closely as possible. I'm just going to call this class example, just to give it a name, and I'm going to finish. You'll see now that I have my subform, and I can move it around somewhere on this form. I can highlight, click, and I'm going to move it. One good just design best practice would be to use your subform and use it down below and kind of indent it on the form, so it shows that it's kind of a part of it, but it's set apart. And then we can look at the actual form view. You'll see we have three views here: form view, a layout view, a design view. I rarely, if ever, use the layout view. I usually just use the form view or the design, and I toggle back and forth between those two. So this is what our form looks like just if we use kind of the defaults and just let it go and see what happens. So as I go through and scroll my records, you can see that I match those up. The student ID is up here, the same student ID is down here, and I can scroll through those records. Student ID is kind of redundant, so just some things that I might want to do to make it look nice. If I go into the design view, I really don't need my student ID to show up twice, so I can click on that field and delete it. You'll notice that the label disappeared as well, because I don't really need that. If I wanted to, I could create, a label that defines what I'm doing. The name of my form is listed up here. I don't really need that. I can delete that as well. If you want to look at properties, you can always right mouse click when you're in design view and see the different properties here of what I'm working on. So depending on what I've clicked on the screen, it'll give me the property of the details that are listed. Or if I'm up in the form header, here's the form header details, and it gives height and color and things like that, which we could change if we really wanted to. In this case, I'm just going to look at it one more time. Here's my student members table. Here's all the trips that each one of those students is involved with and how much they paid. So I like it. It's a form with a subform. If I save this and I call it class example with sub, you'll notice that two different forms were created. Basically, the initial form was called class example, and the subform was called class example with sub. So it created two forms for me. I can look at the subform separately if I really wanted to. And that same thing will happen to you if you create a form with subform. You'll actually have two new objects that show up under your forms heading here in the object pane. If you've done this successfully, you're good to go. You can close it out, and you've just completed assignment 2A, which is the form with subform. The next thing I want to show you is creating a select query, and we talked, I think, briefly about it in class, and I went through it. It's pretty easy. I really want to get to the parameter query as well, and then talk a little bit about the update query, but I don't want this video to go very long. So we're going to do this. We're going to move through this kind of rapidly. The select query just means we're going to create a query that goes out, looks at our data, and finds the students who don't have a release form. So if I go in here and I look at my student members table, you'll see that I have a yes/no type field. And it's actually, if I defined it the way I wanted to, and I didn't, I'm going to change it to a true/false field. It's either true that I have the form or false that I don't have the form. What I want to do is I want to create a query that allows me to do a quick lookup and see who hasn't sent their forms in so that I can call them, send them an email, remind them to get that form. We need it before they go on a trip. So here we go. I'll go to create. You know how I like the wizards because I've talked about them a few times. Let's do the query wizard. It's the easiest way to get started. It's a simple query. We need the student members, and we'll just take all of the fields. We can move them all over with one mouse click. I'm going to click next, and then I'm going to click finish. So here are all 20 of my students and that are in my table. That's like running the query wide open. I've mentioned to you that I like to just run the query without any criteria to see what I have to start with, and then I'll start narrowing it down and kind of creating this funnel. In your book, you'll see that the select query does not include all of the different fields. So I didn't have to include all of these fields if I didn't, want to, or I can delete them. Even better yet, maybe I only want to see the last name, first name. I can just uncheck the show button and it just won't show certain fields. So now I'm only showing last name, first name, telephone, and email, which is what the book wanted me to do. And I'm looking at some criteria. So let me run this again. There we go. Last name, first name, telephone, email. If I want to do best fit, I can double click to see everything that's in that field by clicking up on top of the column. So there's my 20 students. I can see all 20 of them. Now let's go back into the design mode. I only want those who do not have a release form. So here I'm going to type in false. It's a true/false field the way I've defined it. So I want everyone that has not created or turned in their release form. So now when I run it, I get a subset of my data. I only see 4 records. So I know that Luis, Patty, Eleanor, and Tyrone have not given me their release forms, and I can start to bug them to get those in. Just as a sanity check, and this is just how I just make sure that I've gotten the right thing, I can reverse it. Sometimes I'll look at the opposite and say, okay, give me all the true members, and let's see what I get when I run that. And now I have 16 records. So I had 20 to begin with. I had 4 that don't have a release form. I have 16 that do. 16 plus 4 equals 20. I'm happy. I know that this query is working the way I want it to. I'm going to change this back to false. Run it one more time. That's exactly what the instructions told me to do. And I can save that query and close it. All right. The next assignment, which was assignment 2C, is got a little bit of a twist to it, and it's called a parameter query. Parameter queries can be written to prompt whoever's running it to enter some kind of information. There I had to put in true or false. I could have created a parameter query that says, enter something so that I could either look at the ones who have the form or who don't have the form. That's what a parameter query will do for you. Every time you run it, each and every time you run it, it will go out and get the data or do what you tell it to do. So it's like running it uniquely each and every time. Let me show you. The parameter query looks at trips that are below a certain cost. So we're dealing with the trips table, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to create another query using the design or the query wizard. And we're talking about trips. Let's use everything. I want to show it all. Let's take a look. What I'm trying to do now is I want to allow the user to put in a certain amount so that they can see trips that are less than the amount that they place. So this is running the query wide open. I have 10 trips defined, so there's my 10 records. Instead of hard coding and putting in a number here, like I could just put less than 150, and I could run that, and it would give me those 4. But I want to make it so that I can put a different amount in each time, or for whoever is going to run this query, they can put a different amount in. So to do that, I use a square bracket, and this is going to use a question. This is where I'm going to basically have a little pop-up screen that's going to ask the user to enter something. So I can tell them to enter the trip price, and that's fine. I can just use enter the trip price. We'll keep it simple. So instead of putting a number there, I'm going to have somebody give me that value each and every time that I run this particular query. And I'll show you how that works. So when I click run, here's that little pop-up parameter value. So I put it in square brackets, enter the trip price. There's where it says enter the trip price. So now if I want to see all those trips that are below 150, like I just did, there it is. All the 4 of those trips are the ones that are below $150. When I run it again, let's say I want to go back and I'll run it again to test it. I can put a higher value. So maybe I want to go at or below 250, which happens to be all of mine because 245 is my highest. So there's all 10 trips. They're all below $250. Every time I run that query, that's what I'm going to get. I'm going to get a prompt, and it's going to have me do that. Let me save and get out of this. So if somebody comes in and they run the trip query, it's going to enter a price. Maybe I want to see all of them that are under 50 bucks. There's 50. There are 2 trips that are under $50. That's how a parameter query works. It allows you to prompt the user and ask a question so that they can input the information rather than hard coding it right into the query so that it runs the same time every time. That'll get you through 2C. 2D is an update query, and we're getting a little more dangerous here because that's actually going to update records. And in the case, they tell us that sometimes we have insurance that increases the cost of a trip. So you might want to just with one operation update all the trips based on however your insurance comes in. That's called an update query. So let me get rid of this one. And let's do another create, and let's use the query design. And in this one, we're talking about the price of the trip. So we're actually using the trip table. And in this case, I'm not really going to prompt the user for anything. I don't need to really show anything. Actually, sorry, I am going to prompt the user because it asks us to prompt. So it's going to be like a parameter query with an update query on top of it. So I'm going to prompt what kind of increase do you want to apply, and then it's going to increase every one of these trips all in one step. In this case, all I have to do is use one field. Cost is all I'm really dealing with. So here are my different costs of all the trips. That's all I really need to look at when I'm doing this. And there's a special type of query that you'll see up here. There's an update query. And when I click on this up on the ribbon, it's going to add something. It happens pretty quickly. It added a row here that says update to. And that allows us to either set up some criteria so that we can make the changes. If we want to do this, we're going to prompt the user, and then we're going to add whatever they enter. So we could call this the increase, or we could say enter increase. And it goes in square brackets. And here's where it gets a little confusing. Whenever you're doing a calculation and you're dealing with a field name, you also put that in square brackets. So my field is cost, and I'm going to add the increase to the cost field, and that will do the update for me. Here's where it gets tricky. If I run this query right now and I enter something in this increase field, it's going to go out and update all of my 10 records that I had set up, and it's going to increase the price. I don't really want to do that. I don't really want you to do that. I'll show you in class what happens, but you're going to mess up your prices, and then it may cause you problems later down the road. But here's where you would enter an increase. So if you had a $5 increase to each one, I'll go ahead and run it. I can reset my data later. And I click OK. It gives me a big scary message like we've talked about, and the big scary message is, hey, you're about to update some records here. Once you click yes, the undo command doesn't work. I told you that in class. Sometimes the undo will not undo changes. And so it's warning you and telling you just that fact. I can say no and bail out at this point, so it didn't do any changes. Let me go ahead and just run it, and let's just see what happens. And I'll increase everything by, let's say, $10. That'll be easy to look at. And I'm going to say yes. 10 records just got updated there in a blink of an eye. How do I know? Well, I can verify it if I want. I can go to my trips table and open it up. And you'll notice that the highest trip value was 245. Now it's 255. So everything that I had here, all of these trips, just had $10 added to them, and there's no way to undo it. Now I could create another update query and subtract 10 from it, which is what I might do to get my data back where it needs to be. But that is how you create an update query. I think I've taken you far enough. There's a totals query and a report that you have to do for this, and that's part of the deliverables that will be due on Friday, but I'm going to stop there. We're going to have class on Wednesday and again on Friday, so I'll be able to lead you through it. Good luck. Try it on your own, and hopefully you have a good day Monday. Do not come to class. I won't be there, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye.